So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are coming in from. The last couple episodes, I think I've got the intro pretty down. But I do sometimes forget to introduce myself. So I'm attorney Kevin. I'm here on the Not an Accident podcast, episode 44, and court is now in session, ladies and gentlemen, because I have Judge Della C in the house. This is amazing. I mean, so many guests that we've had have just done incredible things, and to have a judge sitting in front of me. I mean, obviously this is what we do, but on the podcast, thank you so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And I mean, you have judge sitting in front of you quite often.
Yeah. I mean, I guess in this forum, it's a little bit different, but I'm so excited to get your thoughts on some of the questions that I have, and share some details as far as, I guess not a lot of people get this opportunity unless maybe something's going on pretty serious or maybe bad in their life. So it'll be good to humanize kind of your experience, what you go through, and things like that. So give a little bit of your background. Obviously, Pinellas County judge, elected in 2022. You won the a three-way race, 44%, and then the general election, I think you took it down for like 59%. So you crushed it. You were recently elected or put in the ring for circuit court judge by Governor DeSantis. That's correct?
So I did apply for elevation to the circuit court. I made the short list, went up to the governor. I was not appointed.
Okay, not appointed. Excuse me, right. But you were on the short list, which is absolutely amazing. But even before that, you were in private practice, and then before that, you did over a decade at the state attorney's office in Pinellas County. Correct?
I did almost exactly a decade. I was there for 10 years.
Glutton for punishment. So
I loved every minute of it. I honestly thought I would never leave the state attorney's office, but then I got an offer I couldn't refuse. So.
There's probably not one person, and I'm very lucky with my partners to kind of, through Mike Boyle, our good friend, to meet a lot of the colleagues of your class, I call it, like meaning like your group of homies, or people rather. And everyone that I've talked to is like, I loved it. It was such an amazing experience. So that's really cool. And you did obviously a lot of good there. So now you are, as a judge, you handle some pretty serious issues as far as dealing with, dating, domestic, and repeat, sexual violence, sometimes issues, injunctions, things like that. So I guess my first question is, how do you leave that, I guess, at the office and deal with these such serious issues on a daily basis?
That is a great question. So I'm in the community violence division, so I hear domestic violence, dating violence, sexual violence, stalking, repeat violence. I also do risk protection orders, which is suspending someone's Second Amendment rights. And I also do Jimmy Rice Act cases, which is civil commitment, involuntary civil commitment of sexually violent predators. So all of this is very serious, very heavy, very emotional. And I have to not be emotional about it. Of course,
yeah, non-biased.
Right, exactly. So leaving it at the office is, I don't know that any of us can ever leave things at the office completely. As an attorney, I couldn't. As a judge, I don't. I think about things constantly. But you really do have to put it in a box. And, you remember that this is the most important day for the people that are in front of you. This is their most important day. This is very serious for them. And so you take it very seriously, but you can't be emotional about it.
I think, what you go through and what you see, it's almost, and I'm trying to find the right word, but I guess something along the lines of, we're very lucky, I guess some of us, to live the life that we live. I got cut off in traffic. I stubbed my toe. Oh, this, that, these smaller things. I mean, you're seeing people in front of you that have either committed or are victims of serious issues sometimes. I mean, it must make the small things so much more, I guess, insignificant in the scheme of things.
I go home every single day and I tell my husband how grateful I am for him.
Yeah, I get it. And so we're going to take and shout out Tom, by the way. We're going to take an even further step back. Why did you decide to go into the law?
I always knew I was going to be a lawyer. From the time I was a little child.
I was third grade.
It was third grade?
Yeah.
I don't remember any time I didn't want to be a lawyer. I come from a family of lawyers. All of my uncles are lawyers. My grandfather was a judge. I just always knew I was going to be a lawyer. There was never a question.
And so where did, obviously you were going to be a lawyer. Where did, being a judge come in all that?
I guess it had been in the back of my mind for a while, but I I don't know that I was ever going to take that step. I don't know that I loved being a lawyer. I loved being an advocate. I really have loved every job as a lawyer I've ever had. But then it was in 2020, I think. I was in private practice at that point, and I was contracted with the sheriff's office to handle their risk protection orders as a lawyer.
That, yeah.
And I was in front of a judge that I've known for quite some time. And after we were done the calendar, he said, "Can you approach on an unrelated matter?" And I said, "Uh-oh."
Yeah, trouble.
Right. And he said, "Have you filled out your application for appointment to Judge Farnell's spot yet?" It was when Judge Farnell was retiring. And I said, "I wasn't aware I was applying." And he said, "Well, you need to." And so we had a conversation about that. I went home and I had a conversation with my husband. And I actually did not apply at that point because we decided it was not the right timing.
Okay.
I decided it was not the right timing. He was very encouraging from the beginning.
Yeah, I could imagine.
But I had a very small child at the time. I was in private practice, so I was making my own schedule, making,
if I need to
good
drop them off at
money,
school, if I need to do this, that,
exactly.
yeah, et cetera.
So I just decided it wasn't the right time. And then about a year later, the same judge said to me, "All right, I really mean it this time." There was another judge retiring. And so I, again, with my husband, he finally said, "I know you really want to do this, so do it. We'll figure it out."
Awesome.
Yes.
That's amazing.
So that was it.
How do you think it's affected from going to a lawyer to being a judge, your mindset as far as, and let me differentiate that. It's I guess it's such a massive switch from being an advocate to being unbiased.
It is
You got to
so
take the good,
hard.
the balancing. Yeah.
It is so hard. Being an advocate, you have a position, you believe in that position, you think you're right, obviously, or you wouldn't be arguing it. But as a judge, you have two sides that both believe they're right, both have great arguments. So it is very difficult to be the neutral party and not advocate.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Switching gears a little off topic. You've obviously, worked for the state for many years. You had, I think, over 70 jury trials there. Obviously, in the day-to-day basis, being in the courtroom. Give us some tips. How do you tell somebody's lying? I know that's a hard one.
Ooh, that is. I think that is the hardest part of my job.
Okay.
So, in my division, I'm the decider of the law, but I'm also the fact finder.
Mm-hmm.
So there's not a jury determining the facts. I determine the facts and the law. Determining the law is the easy part.
Yeah.
Determining the facts, that's the hard part. How do you tell someone's lying? A lot of it's body language.
Okay.
A lot of it is looking in their eyes. A lot of it is corroborating evidence and just what makes sense. You have two parties telling you completely opposite stories, which is pretty much every day in my courtroom. I have two completely opposite stories.
I would imagine it's polar opposite.
Polar opposite. And by the way, most of the individuals that come in front of me are pro se that represent themselves. They don't have lawyers. So I just have two litigants who are telling me exactly opposite stories. Who's lying? Again, it's body language, it's looking in their eyes, it's whether or not what they say makes sense. And a lot of times that's the easiest one.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes down to it, I just have to make a decision.
Well, I was at work on Tuesday. Well, you just told me you hadn't worked in 6 months. So how were you at work? Oh, it was a job interview. Where was the job interview at? Do you have an application? Well, no, it was my friend. Okay.
Exactly.
Exactly. I get it completely. So, I guess what do you do if you can't make a decision?
If you can't make a decision, then the decision is no.
Okay. Really? Okay.
Because the
burden of proof.
The petitioner has the burden of proof. And if I can't tell who's telling the truth, they haven't met their burden of proof.
Fair enough. Going down in another rabbit hole, obviously throughout your career, you've dealt with a lot of people that have committed crimes. Is there some commonality or some trait that you can kind of maybe point to, or one or two things of why people maybe go down a bad path, we'll call it?
I mean, I think if we knew that,
there'd
be no more crime.
Yeah, we'd be rehabilitating them. I mean,
I think that one commonality that I see in all of the commission of crime is substance abuse.
Really? Okay.
And also mental health issues.
Which mental health is huge now. I mean, as far as being recognized and being treated. I mean, you think about 10 or 20 years ago, it was just like, they're just kind of weird, and we blew it off so many times with people that really needed help.
Exactly. And now we have so many resources and we have so much knowledge. So I am hopeful that that will lead us to better rehabilitation and hopefully less recidivism.
And this is my opinion and not yours, so I'll say this. I don't think there's a good decision that ever came from drinking copious amounts of alcohol or substance abuse. I've just been a firm believer of that, and a lot of times bad decision making goes into, after quite a few adult beverages. So, I'm a huge advocate. I haven't had a drink, and not that I had an issue in over 500 days. So, I think your mind's clear and you make much better decision making skills.
I say this in my courtroom, I would say almost on a daily basis. Alcohol turns good people into people who make very bad decisions.
I agree with that. I think that's a great way to summarize it. You talked about a lot of people are representing themselves pro se in your courtroom. And just for the audience, that means that they don't have an attorney. So I saw in your preferred instructions that, and I'm butchering that, but basically your preferred instructions online that unless they had counsel, I believe it may have said, and let me correct me if I'm wrong, that to not call the JA unless they had counsel. Is that correct? Maybe I'm wrong. I could have misappropriated that. So
I don't think so.
Okay.
I hope it doesn't say that. No, parties call my judicial assistant
Okay.
constantly.
So
she's a very busy lady.
Where I was going with that is, and like I said, I could be completely wrong, and I'm probably completely wrong. If you're dealing with a serious issue, tell the people why it's not good to represent themselves.
I actually just had this conversation with a gentleman who wanted to represent himself in a Jimmy Rice case. And I go through...
And tell the people real quick what a Jimmy Rice case is, if you could summarize that briefly.
Involuntary civil commitment for a sexually violent predator.
Got it.
So I go through a colloquy, a conversation with him, and I say, did you go to law school? You know that the attorney on the other side went to law school. Do you know the attorney on the other side has been practicing law for a certain amount of time? You know that I have to treat you like you are a lawyer. The law says I have to treat someone representing themselves like they know the law, like they went to law school, like they know all of the rules, like they know all of the statutes. I have to hold them to the same standard. So I think it is very difficult for someone who didn't go to law school, who hasn't been practicing law, to actually
advocate
for themselves. Yes. Now, that's not to say, I have to say, in my courtroom, people do represent themselves all the time. And the domestic violence statutes specifically say that you don't have to have a lawyer to file an injunction. And I think that's really important because it makes it more accessible, because people can't always afford lawyers.
Of course.
It's very different, I would say, for a criminal case. For a criminal case, I can't stress enough that it is such a bad idea to not have a lawyer.
I agree completely. I've seen the handful of trials, the viral TikToks and things like that of, like, for example, the one, I think it was a guy in Kansas City, I want to say, that like drove his red SUV through a crowd of people and then decided to represent himself. And I believe one of the videos is he's like, I'd like to call the state to the stand. And everybody's like, and he's like, well, if the state isn't present, then I move for a dismissal. And it's like, my guy, please get counsel. Please get counsel. But he wrote it out and then got sentenced to jail for a very long time. So switching gears a little bit, what do you tell all the young ladies out there that have big dreams?
You can do anything. You can do anything. You can do everything. Absolutely. I know that in my generation, probably your generation, I might be a little older than you, but we were told...
I thought you were 25. No. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, you know what? I learned when I was campaigning that you have to own your age as a female lawyer, female judicial candidate, because people will look at you and will honestly say, you're too young to be a judge.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, you have to own your age. So in our generation, we were told you can do anything. You can be anything. You can be anything a man can be. But we were also told you are the primary caregiver for your child. So that, I think, was a very difficult place to be in as a woman of our generation, because how do I do everything a man can do and be the primary caregiver for my child? I think we're learning now in the younger generations that that's not the case. We can all do everything, right? So I would tell all of the little girls and all of the women out there who wonder whether they can, do whatever their dreams are. Absolutely.
I never thought of it that way. As far as you could almost say that you could definitely say that women have it much harder in the fact of they're almost working two jobs, constantly. We almost made it harder when we told young ladies and women that they can do whatever they want in the workplace, because we didn't give them freedom from their I guess original job of being a caregiver.
Exactly.
So it's like we obviously, I wouldn't say, it's the wrong way to phrase it, gave them the ability. Obviously women can do whatever they want, but it's like we just doubled their workload.
Well, we encouraged it, and we said you should have a powerful career.
Yeah.
But you should also be a full-time caregiver.
Yeah.
So yes, it is difficult. But I think, again, in these younger generations, in these days, we're actually discovering and, learning that parenting should be both parents. And,
Absolutely.
that you don't have to do everything, but you can do anything. Does that make sense?
I get exactly what you're saying. I mean, I think it, and to go down a little bit of the relationship dynamics, I mean, I think it's now more than ever a partnership, especially with how difficult the world is, how, politics aside, but how politically, I guess difficult the world is right now, and this and that. It's a partnership, and it's not, oh, you do this and I do that. It's, hey, which one of us tackling this big list, rather than going, oh, this automatically goes in your column and this automatically goes in my column. So,
exactly. And again, shout out to Tom. I couldn't do what I do without my husband.
That's amazing. That's amazing. You were a judge during COVID. How difficult was that time, or what was that like?
I was not a judge during COVID.
Oh, 22, right? 22. Or I guess you were tail end of it, maybe?
Took the bench January of 2023.
Okay, got it. So we were past a lot of it.
We were past a lot of it. I will tell you, a lot of the policies were still in place.
Okay.
That were no longer necessary.
Okay.
So we still had a policy of doing a lot of Zoom hearings, which in my division, and completely different when you're talking about a civil division, but in my division, Zoom hearings are not conducive
and that's what I was kind of getting to. Is
Yes.
What kind of effects did it have? I mean, I would imagine everything's back now in person for the most part.
For the
Yes and
most
no?
part,
Yeah.
yes. I try to do all of my hearings in person.
I
It
don't
is
blame
my
you.
preference to do everything in person. Obviously, there are extenuating circumstances, and we have the technology, so we can use it, but I much prefer in person.
I don't blame you at all. What's something that that people misunderstand about judges?
I would say most people think judges can do anything. They think—
Could you expand on that?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially, I'm going to say the people representing themselves come into my courtroom and they think I have the power to do anything I want to do, that I can order anything, that I can— they don't understand that I have to follow the law, and that my primary purpose is following the law, even if I don't like it, even if it may not seem fair. And that there are procedures that we have to follow. People come in my courtroom, and I think it's probably from watching TV and movies. They come in my courtroom and they think, if I want an injunction, most people think of it as a restraining order. If I want a restraining order, I just get a restraining order. I say I don't want them to come near me, I just get that. And it's very frustrating for them to learn that I don't have unlimited, omnipotent power.
Yeah. No, that's very interesting. That I mean, I'm sure people have those expectations. Like, all I have to do is just, file this and done. Like, it's going to be granted. They don't really realize the burden of proof that they have, or the evidence they have to present, or anything like that. So I think, and we talk a little bit about AI on the podcast and how it affects things. I'm sure ChatGPT and AI is becoming a little bit more prevalent in maybe your courtroom or others.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
I will say it is.
Well, I read on ChatGPT, so
it's very easy to spot a motion that's been written by ChatGPT.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Just because it's not, you've written so many and seen so many that it's like, I'm sure there's definitely a differentiation in the tone as far as it goes. So, have you seen any fake case law yet?
I have not run across any fake case law yet, but I'm on the lookout for it.
That's what I'm saying. I think, we don't use it in motion practice or anything like that, but a little bit of research here and there. We'll use Westlaw, obviously. But I've heard of, some fake case law, ChatGPT may trying to help a little bit too much. So.
Yes, that has been an issue. I have not seen it yet.
And I think so. I want to say that the Florida Bar just came out with a recent rule that if you did write something with the assistance of ChatGPT, then you have to, or excuse me, ChatGPT, AI in general, that you have to disclose that, which is good. Absolutely, you should have to. So.
It is. AI, I think, can be a great tool. Technology is a wonderful thing when you use it appropriately and in measure. Right. So as long as you are disclosing that you used it, and long as you're actually checking the work and checking the sites, I don't have any problem with it, but you have to check it.
Of course. You've had, not only as a practitioner, you've come up against a lot of great lawyers, but obviously as a judge. What have you seen throughout your career that separates a good lawyer from a great lawyer?
Preparation.
Okay.
Someone who puts the time in and is prepared with their argument, prepared with the case law, someone who walks in my courtroom ready to go.
How do you know, I guess, they're more prepared? Just the way they talk, the way they answer, just how they, you know what I mean? Is it just, let me look at that. Let me get that for your thing. Is it just confusion and things like that kind of gives it away, I guess? Probably a lot of different reasons.
You can kind of just tell, but also it's, they have their exhibits marked. They have case law ready to, copies of it ready to hand to me. They have their argument well organized. It's just
cleaner package,
yes,
I guess.
Thank you. That's a good way to put it.
Very cool. You've been in front of many juries, but obviously you're making the decisions from the bench. From your time in front of a jury, what do you think that they care most about? And maybe it's different depending on the situation. Are there any commonalities that you see?
Well, kind of like we were talking about earlier, they want it to make sense. Right? It's got to make sense. I don't know. I wish I knew what a jury was thinking. I've always wanted to be on a jury so that I could actually know what a jury was thinking. But
I think the biggest thing, I think it's both those things. I think it's telling a story that's actually cognitive, that flows. And I think it comes down to preparedness as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that, sometimes that works in the other realm. I've heard of colleagues talking to a jury after the fact and being like, I just felt so bad that they had such a bad lawyer that I, gave them X or Y or things like that. So that sometimes it maybe helps you. Not often though, but I think the preparedness comes, it equals credibility.
Absolutely, it does. And I will tell you, I had a jury trial when I was a young prosecutor. And we ended up hearing from one of the jurors. They ended up calling in, sometimes they want to tell us everything.
Okay.
So, and just so everyone knows, when you're on a jury, no one can ask you your thoughts. But after the case is over, you're free to tell anyone your thoughts. So we had a juror call, and they said that I said the word okay so many times that it just made me sound like I had no idea what I was talking about.
Oh my gosh.
So I went and I watched some tape of myself in trial, not that particular trial, and I learned, oh my goodness, I do say the word okay way too much when I'm asking questions. I say it before the question and after the question every single time. So the juror really thought that I was an incompetent lawyer because I said okay too many times.
There you go.
So
yeah, it's weird things sometimes.
It's weird things, but you know what? I'm so glad I learned that because I stopped saying the word okay.
I get it completely. I get it. How do you handle, and we kind of touched on it a little bit, how do you handle situations where the law and fairness seem at odds?
That is the hardest situation that I run up against. And honestly, I'm in that situation a lot in my division. And bottom line, the law always wins. I have to follow the law. And
I really want to I don't mean to cut you off. I really want to get that point across, though, that the legal process is not the judge just going, hey, I like this person and it's a Tuesday and I'm wearing my favorite blue suit. So yeah, I'm going to agree with them. There's a process and a landscape, and following the law and following the procedures and following the case law. All of that is very important. It's not just, hey, let me pick, A or B.
It is my number one job is to follow the law. And like you said, it's rules of procedure, it's the statutes, it's case law. And there are so many rules that I'm bound by.
Mhm.
And just because I don't like the law doesn't mean I can just decide not to follow it. Very wise, one of my colleagues just recently, I think, quoted Justice Rehnquist to me and said, if you're making decisions that you like all the time, you're not making the right decisions.
Really? Okay, that's very
So,
interesting. That
I'm
makes sense.
paraphrasing, obviously.
Yeah, of course, of course.
But yes, there are times when I have to follow the law, and I would rather make a different decision, but I'm always going to follow the law.
Is there a memorable case that sticks out in your prosecutor days that you could tell us about?
There are so many. I just had this in my mind because we were talking about people representing themselves.
Mhm.
I did a murder trial with a pro se defendant representing himself, where he had actually.
I'm just saying, wow, because that's like,
I know.
don't do that.
He had killed his girlfriend and buried her in the backyard.
Okay.
And it was such an interesting case because of all of the forensics that went into it. And it was years down the road. One of his friends just grew a conscience, felt bad, knew about it, had helped him actually carry the body, and just was sitting in an invest with a prosecutor. I mean, you know what that is.
Yes.
If a crime has been committed, the prosecutor has to meet in person with the victim and any witnesses before they can file charges. So completely random, unrelated case.
It wasn't even anything to do with that.
No, it was completely unrelated.
Because it was just probably an unsolved crime.
Exactly.
Yeah, she was just a missing person at that time.
So this gentleman was sitting in an invest with a prosecutor and said, while I have you here, I have something that's been weighing down on me. I just feel like I need to tell you. And this is a young prosecutor who says, okay, give me a minute, and goes and leaves the room and calls her supervisor and says, oh my goodness, what do I do?
Yeah. What do you do? I guess you do exactly what he did, but yeah, that's earth-shattering.
Yes, exactly. So then the case just built from there. I was not that prosecutor, but I ended up trying the case. And that lasted 2 weeks. It would not have been a 2-week case if he had a lawyer. We were listening to his phone calls from the jail.
Okay.
Because you can do that. You can listen to phone calls from the jail during the trial. And he obviously didn't know that we were listening to him because he didn't have a lawyer.
Oh, this was the
the defendant.
The defendant. Okay,
in
got
the
it.
murder
Not
trial.
the witness. Okay,
Right.
got it.
And he kept saying, I'm doing such a great job. I'm going to win this case. I think I'm going to go to law school when I get out of jail.
Okay.
So if he had had the advice of counsel, first of all, he wouldn't have been talking
Ever.
on the phone in the jail. But that was one of the most interesting trials I've ever done.
I've said it, and firsthand, obviously, between your husband and private practice and things, I tell car accident victims all the time. I mean, obviously, that's what I do, and you can do it yourself. The legal process is out there. I wouldn't say designed. I would say out there where somebody certainly can represent themselves and navigate through and kind of bounce through and stuff like that. You can probably figure it out with the tools out there, and if you put your mind to it. I wouldn't recommend it. I could probably climb up on my roof and redo my roof by myself. It doesn't mean that that's a good idea. If I broke my arm, I could probably put it in a cast and maybe move it around a little bit and probably fix it. Doesn't mean I shouldn't call an orthopedic.
It's never going to work the same again if you do that.
I implore, and I think I always try to get past a couple messages throughout the podcast when I have a guest on, and the biggest thing I can say is I understand times are tough. I understand money's tight. I understand it's a difficult time. But, if you're facing a legal issue, get the right help, or at least pay the couple $100 for a consultation. I mean, to at least know what you're up against.
Absolutely.
Because you could be walking into something that's way more costly, whatever, whether your freedom or your time or your money, than just paying a lawyer to handle it.
I will tell you I have been in situations where I have someone in front of me where one of the parties has a lawyer, the other party doesn't have a lawyer, and I can't give any legal advice. I can't help them at all. And I am thinking, you're making such a bad decision right now.
You have to let this party happen. Yeah.
You're about to do really the wrong thing, but I can't tell you that you're doing the wrong thing. I can't tell you that you're saying the wrong thing. So it is very crucial, I think, if you can.
So we talked about it a little bit earlier as well. Your husband's an attorney and a
Yes.
friend of the firm. How is that dynamic with two attorneys? Obviously, you're the judge, so you win. So I'm just kidding. But how does that dynamic go for? And I'm not just talking about you guys being attorneys and in the legal field. Successful couples and things like that. How do you navigate through life, or what are your suggestions for that?
So I love it that we're both attorneys, and we actually worked together
Yep.
for several years. We worked in the same firm, and I will say we never stopped talking about the law and our cases, and that is dinner table conversation. Our poor kid, but he's learned to actually understand it a little more. He probably knows more about the law than most adults do, and it is so. It's therapeutic to me to know that I have my husband who understands what it's like to have such a high responsibility, high stress job. So he understands when I come home at the end of the day and I am having a hard time putting things in the box. And I understand when he comes home at the end of the day and he's having a hard time putting things from the office, leaving it at the office. So we really understand each other, which to me is really important.
Obviously, you putting cases or doing the right thing by people is obviously the most important, honoring the law, et cetera, and hoping these people get the rehabilitation that they need. For me, it's getting them, their settlement, getting them their case closed. I don't want to speak for you, but I'll speak for myself. When people are like, they'll ask me, how are you doing? You seem stressed. Is everything okay? And it's like, everything's fine. Everything's great, more or less. But, I try to tell people that it's not stress. You have to understand that I'm carrying the weight of hundreds of clients, and 90% of the time when somebody's giving me a call, it's not to ask me how my day's going. So there's a lot of heavy baggage that comes from that. And I love what I do. And that's the obligation that I undertook. But it can weigh on you when you're constantly seeing, the worst situations for people or some bad actors all the time.
It absolutely is. And my husband, Tom, always says, you hire a lawyer so that your problems become my problems.
Correct.
So like you said, you're carrying the weight of everyone's problems on your shoulders. And for me, it's knowing that I'm making decisions that affect people's lives in major ways. I'm deciding whether someone gets to see their children or not.
Mm-hmm. It's massive.
And knowing how important that is and knowing how important it is that I'm making the right decision and wanting to make sure that I'm taking these people's lives as seriously as I should, it weighs very heavily.
Absolutely. No, I can understand that completely. Have you ever had a situation where somebody has come back after the fact, maybe that I guess, dealt with or ruled upon and said thank you, or that you got them back on the path?
Yes.
And how does that feel?
That is one of the best feelings in the world. I can tell you, we do kind of follow-up status check hearings sometimes, and especially in these domestic violence cases where the family is actually, I'm issuing an injunction, but their end goal is treatment and reconciliation, or not reconciliation, but co-parenting, being able to actually be parents and not be together. And to see people who frankly hated each other so much that they were harming their children in the process of hating each other come back 6 months later and they're actually successfully co-parenting, and you can tell that they're really putting their children's interest first. It's the best feeling in the world, and that makes everything that I do worth it.
If somebody's going through something with, and not to put you on the spot, but domestic violence, obviously that's a massive issue, and horrible. Where can they go and get help? Can you talk about that?
Absolutely. There are a lot of resources out there. I would say CASA is the domestic violence advocates that we deal with the most. They have lawyers that can help. They have domestic violence advocates. They have a ton of resources.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What do you enjoy most about serving the community? Because that's what you do at the end of the day as a judge. I mean, you're serving your peers in the community, at large.
Absolutely. What I enjoy the most is what we were just talking about, is seeing the end result when it's a good end result, and seeing that what I have done and the time and the blood and sweat and tears I put into a case actually helps them in the end.
If they have the same passion that you have in the fire and people to become a judge, what would you recommend to, if a lawyer's watching out there, what they can do to kind of, obviously go to law school, pass the bar, become an attorney. What else can they do to go down that career path?
Well, my particular path, and I think it's important to have litigation experience if you want to be a trial judge, because when you're on the bench, you have to make evidentiary decisions in a snap. I mean, it has to be very quick. You can't stop and think, well, is that hearsay? Is it not hearsay? You can't go back and do some research.
You got to know your stuff.
You have to know your stuff. And if you didn't know the evidence code, if you didn't know litigation, if you didn't know discovery, the process, the rules, it would be very difficult to make decisions very quickly on the fly. I would also say networking is huge. Get to know as many people as you possibly can. Get out there, join all the associations, the bar association, everything. Get to know people. That is really, really important.
I think I talk about all the time on the podcast, I say you can be the best lawyer in the world, but if you don't know anybody, how are you going to get clients?
Yes.
So it's, I tell people all the time, start from, and I wish I would have started sooner, but, start in high school, start in college, start in whatever you can, make meaningful relationships with people, because these are the people that are going to be supporting you later in life, whether you want to run for judge or, customers, clients, et cetera, et cetera. These are going to be the people in your circle that are cheering for you when you need to move forward. And it must have been so humbling. I mean, I saw some of your, the people that were vouching for you and supporting you. I mean, that must have been so humbling to see so many, incredible names be in your corner.
It was incredibly humbling. It was such an honor to have the support of a lot of the people that I have, to everybody that supported me. But yes, it was incredibly humbling.
I will end with this. I cannot thank you enough for coming on the podcast and allowing me to, look at, your thoughts and things like that. Incredible opportunity. I always ask this question at the end of every podcast. At the end of your story, when the music stops, what do you want to be remembered for?
I want to be remembered as a judge. That's, what I'm here as today. So I would like to be remembered as someone who was always fair and always listened. Because when I was a litigator, all I cared about was that the judge actually listened and heard what I said and made a fair decision. So that's my goal every day, is just to actually listen and actually hear what people say.
Well, absolutely incredible. It's, again, a true honor to have you on the podcast. So I really appreciate that. I will talk to you about what you want me to put in the description as far as tagging. Usually we tag social medias and stuff like that. This is a little bit different of a situation. So we'll figure that out off camera. But yeah, again, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Make sure you're taking care of each other and being kind to people. Make sure if a situation ever arises that you get, the legal assistance that you need. And above all else, take care of one another and be good people. So like and subscribe as always. This will be out in, I think in the next couple, well, we're filming this ahead of time, but it will be out shortly. And obviously we'll let everybody know that. As always, it is not an accident that Judge Cope is as successful as she is. And I appreciate you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. See you guys.